Hi guys, my name is Vanessa Smedley and I'm a painter. Today we are going to paint these nice little daffodils here because they are the harbingers of spring. That's a fancy word for they are the signal that spring has sprung. I was driving through my town the other day and drove by one of my favorite parks, and there's this hill that the daffodils always spring up on first, and it's always my signal of spring, and they were there. So I had to stop, take a ton of pictures, and that's why we're doing this, because folks, I don't love winter, and I'm always so happy to see these little guys. So let's do this. Here are the materials for today. Feel free to pause and screenshot, or they are listed in the description for you. I'm going to start out by mixing all of my colors at once. So I'm starting out with 3 puddles of cadmium yellow, and then I'm adding varying degrees of phthalo blue into each one, and then adding just a little bit of alizarin crimson to gray them down. And I'm basically kind of doing one that's a little more yellow, one that's a little more green, and then the darkest one is going to have a little bit of Paynes Grey added to it as well. Now that we have our greens sorted, I'm just getting a puddle of lemon yellow, cadmium yellow, and a little bit of burnt umber and Paynes Grey mixed together. I'm going to paint my background very blurry, so I'm going to go ahead and mask out these flowers. I'm really just masking the edges so that I don't have to worry much about it when I'm painting the background. So I've dipped my brush into a mixture of water and liquid dish soap first, and then dipped it into the masking fluid, and now I'm just painting around the edges, and I'm going to let that dry for at least 30 minutes when I get finished. Now, I didn't show this on camera, but I also splattered a little bit of this masking fluid into the background to create some texture. Okay, since the background is going to be blurry, I'm just wetting the entire area with my number 14 round brush, and then I'm going to begin dropping in little patches of both of my yellows here, because I'm wanting this to look like diffused, blurry other daffodils in the background. So I've done that. Now I'm adding in my lightest of the greens, and then I'm going to add in some of the darker greens as well for some variety in different places. And then I've added some of my burnt umber and Paynes Grey mixture for a little bit more variety. And now I'm coming back in with my darkest of the greens, and I'm adding some of the detail in the background that's going to look like blurry stems. That wet wash, I've dropped a little bit of table salt, and now I'm coming back in for more of these stems and leaves. I've let all of that dry completely, and I'm coming in with my rubber cement eraser and removing all of that masking fluid. Very, very quickly, apparently. Okay, for all of these stems and leaves, a lot of them I'm going to start out with the lightest of the green and then add in the medium green. And then I might even add in a little bit of the darker green if I'm feeling spicy. On this leaf here, you can see that I'm starting out with the lightest color, then I'm adding the medium color and just blending them in together while they're still wet. And that's basically what I'm doing for all of these leaves, rather than explain it to you over and over again. And you'll notice too that I'm skipping around and I'm not painting the leaves that are beside one another, because I don't want them to bleed into each other. So I'm doing a leaf, skipping a leaf, doing the next one, and then allowing those to dry before I come back in and do the leaves that are adjacent to them. And that'll just help keep your leaves a little more clean. And now that I have one layer of paint on all these lovely stems and leaves, I'm actually going to start on the flower. So I start on the trumpet part, and I'm just giving it a nice coat of cadmium yellow, and that's going to be the warmest of the two yellows, and that's for the middle part here. So I'm giving it a nice kind of flat coat over the whole thing, and then I'm going to come back in and lift some of that out of the middle where you can see the sun shining through it. So I've got just a damp brush with clean water, and I'm lifting out some of that color. I'm not trying to get it white, I'm just trying to get it lighter so that later I can glaze a little bit of the lemon yellow over the top of it. And then I just fill in a few more leaves that I missed earlier. Now that I've let the trumpets dry, I'm actually coming back in with some very, very watery lemon yellow, and I'm just giving it kind of a flat wash on these, although I am adding a thicker consistency of the lemon yellow in the areas that will later be shaded. So I'm just giving it a nice good flat wash here. Now we're going to start working on the shadows. So I've mixed up a little bit of cadmium yellow, cadmium orange, and a little tiny bit of my medium green mixture, and I begin to add in the shadows. And I'm just adding the color, and then I'm softening the edges with clean water. Now, yellow can be a very, very tricky color to shade. You can end up with a lot of really ugly, muddy colors. That's what happens when you try to shade with a black, for instance. What I'm choosing to do here is called analogous shading. So if you look at the color that you're trying to shade on the color wheel, look at the colors adjacent to that color, and those are called the analogous colors. So in this case, if you're looking at yellow, the color right next to it on the color wheel would be orange, and the color on the other side of it would be green. I'll show you how to do the green later, but for right now, we're going to choose the orange. The trumpet in the middle of this flower is basically a warm yellow, so that's why I'm choosing to go to the warmer side of the analogous colors. Another way of shading yellow is to glaze in the complementary color, which in this case would be purple. You could use a very, very, very light glaze of purple if you wanted to, or mix it into your yellow and try it that way. But sometimes I feel like the analogous colors are a little more harmonious than using the complementary. Using the complementary color can sometimes get really muddy really quickly. You have to be very, very careful at how much you add. It would be worth it to do some exercises to see which type of shading yellow that you like better. I've let all of that dry, and now I'm actually coming back in and I'm glazing a little bit of lemon yellow over the top of those lighter areas in the middle of the trumpet. And that'll just give it a little bit more pop. Okay, now for the green analogous shading. So I've added a little bit of my lightest green color into lemon yellow, and I'm adding that in here very, very gingerly to all of the shaded details here. Because to be honest with you, I'm a little bit scared because yellow is such a light color, there's really not much margin for error here. Also, I've chosen to do the green color on this one because lemon yellow actually leans toward green to start with, so that's why I'm choosing the green. Plus, to me, it just looks green like that in the photo, so. I may have erred a little bit on the light side here, but it's better to do that than to go too dark too quick, because I can always come back in later with another glaze of a darker color. With yellow, you definitely want to build up shadow very, very slowly. You don't want to slap it in there too dark too quick, because then you have nowhere to go and it looks really, really weird with the amount of contrast that you have added. Now I've added a little bit more green to my shadow mix, and I'm doing these darkest parts of this shadow here. It's time to ground these little guys here, so we are going to add in some of these darker shadows in the background. So I've added some more Paynes Grey to my darkest green mix, and I'm just adding in these dark shadows that can be seen behind the flowers. I've let all of that dry, and now I'm coming back in with a darker, thicker consistency mix of my medium green, and I'm adding some more details to some of these leaves. I'm also using a little bit of my darkest color as well for detail here and there. And I'm still employing the same technique of skipping a leaf. Basically, I'm painting every other leaf so that they won't run into each other. One interesting fact about daffodils is that, despite their sunny reputation, they actually have a compound in their sap that is toxic to other flowers. So, if you want to display them in a bouquet with other flowers like tulips, you actually have to soak their stems in water for at least an hour, possibly up to 24 hours before you can put them in water with other plants. Or they'll kill your other flowers. That's not very nice. They're actually pretty toxic in general. They can be fatal if they're eaten in large amounts, so don't be chowing down on a bunch of daffodils. I've added even more green to my shadow color for the middle of the trumpet, and I'm adding in those little stamens, or whatever they're called. I think it's stamens, but I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't quote me on that. Alright, well, I hesitate to do this, but I do think that this green needs to be darkened up because there's really just not quite enough contrast between the shadow areas and the light areas. So I'm adding another glaze of the same green with just a tad more green in it. Very, very tad. Just incrementally, tiny little bit greener. And I'm just adding that over the darkest areas, really. I'm not doing it over all of the green that I'd added earlier. I'm just adding it in the darkest areas of the shadows. Now that those shadow areas are a little bit darker, I'm coming back in with just some plain lemon yellow, and I'm glazing a little bit here and there to add a little bit more of yellow back in here. Now I'm using my lightest green to go into the very center of this trumpet here and add this greenish cast just to give a little bit more detail here. Now this is very, very risky at this final stage of this painting, but I still think that this trumpet could use some more shadow. So I'm glazing a very, very, very watery lightest green here over the top of the darkest shadow parts of the trumpet. And I think that I just barely got away with it. And then I'm doing the same, adding just a tiny little bit more green in the darkest shadow areas of the lemon yellow parts of the flowers. Man, this is nerve-wracking because I could completely ruin it at this point, on the home stretch even. Now I'm going to add some final details with some pastel pencils. I have a yellow one in my hands and I'm just adding a little bit of reflected light on the side of the stems. That's really just all that's needed here, just a tiny little bit of that light shining on it, because I mean, you know, the light is shining through the flowers themselves, so there must be some light on the stems. So we're just adding a little bit of that in there now. And here's the finished product with all the tape removed and signed and stuff. And I do think that it's a pretty successful painting. I mean, using the green and then using the orange, all the different ways to shade this yellow, I think it works. And there you have it, the glorious little signals of spring themselves. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff, because that's how this channel gets to grow. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.